Good evening, everybody. Come on in the room. I want to talk about the session that we had today. While you're coming in, just so you know, in Richmond land, in the General Assembly land, today is still Thursday. So we've been in session since Thursday, if you will. But come on in. I want to talk about some votes that I made today and also yesterday for the Virginia Clean Economy Act. So y'all come on in, come on in. I'll wait a few moments and let's talk about this. All right, so y'all can share this. We can talk about it. First, I want to start off by saying today was the first day that I was not able to uphold a campaign promise. And that campaign promise was fighting for independent redistricting reform. Now, I know people have followed this session closely, waiting for the constitutional amendment. The Republicans, the media have orchestrated and led the narrative on how the Democrats were going to gerrymander themselves now that they were in power. But I want to speak to a couple different things because all session long, we've been dealing with this hanging over narrative that the Democrats were going to gerrymander once they came into power. So when I campaigned both in 2017 and in 2019, I campaigned on fair redistricting, an independent commission being created to handle redistricting for 2021. Last session, the General Assembly passed a constitutional amendment. It passed. It had to pass again this year, and now it goes over to the voters. I campaigned again on that same constitutional amendment while articulating my concerns with the amendment. Now, remember, at the college debate at UMW, my opponent and I talked about the amendment and how I would be supporting it and how I had issues with it. And immediately after the event was over, I had a group of people that came over to me and said, "We hear you, but we need you to support the amendment." And I was still good on it. I talked about it and I said how I was going to vote on the amendment, even though I expressed my issues. And I want to talk about some of those issues. Number one, I campaigned on an independent redistricting commission. This amendment that we just passed tonight is not an independent redistricting commission. It still has legislators in it. Okay. So that was one of the concerns that I had. Another concern that I had that it did not explicitly lay out protections for communities of color. And I've had some feedback with those who communicate on here who say, that that's not that important or we will eventually get to it or whatever have you. And so with those issues, if I wanted to support an independent redistricting commission, I still had issues. In this session, I toiled over it. What was I going to do? And I'm kind of glad that it was one of the last things that we had to vote on because I have racked my brain over the past couple of months what we were going to do with this amendment. But I have to give a shout out again to Delegate Sia Price, who crafted guardrail legislation that will fight with this amendment. And I want you to pay attention to the votes that were made. When Delegate Price's bill came out, and I don't have the bill numbers right here with me, but the bill that Delegate Price, that we passed today, we still passed it, it effectively ended gerrymandering in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So every time the Republicans or the media say the Democrats were going to gerrymander their way to keep their majority, was null and void because we already passed legislation ending gerrymandering in Virginia. Then on top of that, check every person who voted against it. So we voted today on one. There was a floor amendment that was introduced last night. And we allowed it an evening for people to review it, and we came back. That bill, that In my opinion, and I reached out, I talked to a few different people, that amendment, in my opinion, was giving us a fair, independent redistricting commission. There were some arguments back and forth that the Secretary of the Commonwealth would be the one that would make the appointees, and I want to pinpoint that particular thing. The Secretary of the Commonwealth would not be the one making the appointees, but every appointment in the Commonwealth comes through the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office. And so I voted for that floor amendment. The floor amendment did not pass. And I want to make sure that there's transparency here. If the floor amendment had passed, it would have effectively killed the constitutional amendment for us to come back and put that exact same floor amendment as the constitutional amendment. And the governor most likely would have called us in for a special session for redistricting in 2021. And so I know House GOP is going to post it and they're going to twist the words and twist the videos and only put the shots that they want to put in there. But the minority leader explicitly stated that I take that back. Delegate Bell explicitly stated we would not have a plan for redistricting in 2021 if the amendment failed. That's not true. We passed a bill authored by Delegate Sia Price for ending gerrymandering that the Republicans voted against. And so if they were so concerned about making sure we got rid of gerrymandering, they should have voted for Delegate Price's bill. And so the amendment did pass, and I want people to understand that. The constitutional amendment for redistricting reform passed and will be on your ballot in November. This is the only piece of legislation that I campaigned on, stating that I would support, that I did not support. And I want the constituents of the 28th District to understand why I voted against it after campaigning so hard. Even so much as a few days ago, there were people here who were supporters of mine, who were constituents of mine, and I was still supporting the amendment. If anyone has watched the debates and the arguments from my colleagues in the Black Caucus, and even my colleagues from the Democratic Caucus, you would understand the importance of why we needed to make the amendment better. But now we have something coming to the voters that will go on the books forever. And it's not easy to repeal. I've heard someone say, well, it's okay. We'll amend it and make it better. Delegate Don Scott made it so clear today that in 2007, the General Assembly made a constitutional amendment making same-sex marriage illegal in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In 2012, the Supreme Court came back and ruled that as unconstitutional. But guess what? That is still in Virginia's Constitution. It's not easy to amend the Constitution of Virginia. That's why an amendment has to come through one General Assembly session, have an election, come through a second General Assembly session, and then go to the voters. And it's not easy to change a constitutional amendment. So I want people to understand the amendment passed. I voted against it, and this is the only thing that I campaigned on that I backtracked on. And the reason being is because I did not feel we needed to put something so flawed into the Constitution. All right, I got that off my chest. When I tell y'all today was a stressful day. And again, I want you to understand we are still technically in Thursday legislatively. We just adjourned the session today all the way from Thursday. So technically we skipped Friday and we'll now start session again tomorrow because we still have business to handle. I want to let you know about the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which I did vote in favor of yesterday, but I voted in favor of it with apprehension. And I think I made my statements very clear. Yesterday, or I will say today, we voted to protect the planet. But tomorrow, or next General Assembly session, when we come back, we have to vote to protect our constituents. When it comes to handling clean energy, it's not going to be cheap. It's going to be expensive. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not putting the brunt of that deal on our constituents and on the ratepayers. And so I had two major concerns with the VCEA. Number one, there wasn't a strong enough protection for ratepayers. That means Lottie Dottie and everybody who pays their utility bills every single day. That's y'all watching. We wanted to make sure there was protections for you all in there. And so I want to give credence to those who worked with the legislators, those of us who had concerns, to get it to where it was. It still wasn't perfect. Also for the SCC oversight. There was a clause in there that basically stated that it was a free-for-all. You know, the SCC did not have to exercise oversight. And so that is what bothered me as well. But we will be working next session with the stakeholders to make sure that is made better tomorrow, to make sure we're protecting our ratepayers and protecting the people who are everyday citizens who pay their bills. So I wanted people to understand that I was the people that held up the vote on the VCA because they wanted to make sure that I could support it. And there were many colleagues of mine who did not vote in support of it. But we still have a fight ahead of us to work. And I've already received some assurance from the stakeholders that we're going to work together. Session is scheduled to come to an end tomorrow. I will be coming back to give an update of where we are on what bills we passed, what has made it out of the Senate. There's already quite a few bills that are headed over to the governor's signature and I'm really excited about that. And so just stay up to date on here. You'll see what we have going on. I also want to talk about another thing that took place this afternoon. We voted for the Virginia CARES Act, which basically was a non-discrimination bill, especially for the LGBTQ community. And I gave a floor speech. The Senate came over with an amendment stating that institutions that may be religiously owned would be exempt from the Virginia CARES Act. And I have strong apprehensions about that. And so I spoke against it and the amendment failed. And what I want you to understand, what this means is, let's say there is a Baptist General Hospital, or there is a church preschool or something like that. It would basically say that those institutions would be exempt from practicing non-discrimination. So basically that means if you are a preschool, you could tell a gay couple they're not allowed to bring their child to the preschool. Now, if this was a private church-owned day school, they could do that because they're practicing First Amendment and that's their religious held beliefs. They could do that. But when you are a public entity, meaning your doors are open to the public, you cannot discriminate against. And so I understand that people have their theological views and their religious held beliefs, but you cannot discriminate against people when you are a publicly owned and operating organization, institution, or company. And so we got rid of that. I also want y'all to understand that we have what some states don't have. We have the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. That means individuals, churches, organizations that are private organizations, that are religious entities, are protected if they have, statements of beliefs or different things like that. So I hear a lot of people are saying that Christianity is under attack and my faith is being attacked. And I would pinpoint you to the early apostles. Until you're being pulled apart by horses like Mark, until you're crucified upside down like Peter, until you're poured with burning oil like St. Stephen, is your faith really under attack? I would ask you to go overseas, to Africa, to the Middle East, to China, and some of these other countries where Christians are literally massacred and killed every single day. And you're worried about how you're going to treat somebody. Or even as I said in my floor speech today, as Christians, we're called to be known by our love. What are you doing with your witness when you tell somebody that you disagree with as a public organization, you don't want to serve their kind here? So I am glad that the Senate amendment on that did not pass. And the Virginia CARES Act is headed over to the governor. He has not signed it yet, but it is headed over to the governor. And we are excited that moving forward, people will no longer be allowed to be discriminated against based on their color, based on who they love, based on where they came from, and based on who they identify as. Once again, I want to thank you all so much for your support, for listening to me, for understanding how I vote. And as I said in my last Facebook Live, not everybody's going to agree with me. There are people who voted for me and there are people who did not vote for me. And even some of my supporters may not agree with every single vote. But I believe I'm doing what's best for the constituents of the 28th District and also for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So thank y'all. I will most likely come do another Facebook Live tomorrow after we adjourn Sine Die, which is the final adjournment of session, and keep you up to date on what we have going on. And I still want to give to you an outline of all the legislation that I championed and patroned, and also as chief co-patron, we have some great things. I don't know if you saw the post earlier about capping insulin at $50. We campaigned on $100. We voted on $30. And today we passed a bill out of the House and the Senate capping insulin insulin charges at $50. That's headed over to the governor's desk, and we're really excited about that. We still have some other things for healthcare we're working on, even some things for teachers we're working on. We got some great money in the budget for the University of Mary Washington, so we're really excited about that as well. But I'll be coming back in another Facebook Live, hopefully tomorrow after we adjourn Sine Die, to explain what we have out there. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. When we come back in district in the next week, we'll be putting up dates for town halls, specifically in Mayfield, in South Stafford, and the like. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much, and I will chat with y'all soon. Talk to you later.